Hello and assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, everyone's doing well. I'd like to continue from part one on the topic of Muta. Now, in the previous video, we talked a little bit about what Muta is. We talked about the positions that both Sunnis and Shias hold with respect to Muta. And today, I want to talk to you about the Muta itself and what are its pillars and its statutes. Now, pillars refer to the elements that are foundational to making a Muta considered viable or valid, and those conditions that are important to have within the Muta relationship. We'll be talking about that today. So without further ado, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. So there are four pillars of Muta. And these four pillars are the first being the formula or the verbal statements that the couple has to make to each other in order to become married. This is called the formula. And then there is the persons, meaning that only certain people can be a part of the Muta process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then there's the time period or the Mut'a. Now the time period has to do with the fact that there must be a time period stipulated in the contract, or else without that, there can be no Muta. And lastly, the dower. The dower also has to be stipulated, made clear, and made understandable, and must be agreed upon. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let me get into each and every one of these. So with regard to the formula, it's important to understand in a Muta contract that it is the woman who offers herself to the man. And basically, in this type of relationship, there must be a declaration and an acceptance, meaning that it is the wife or the woman who basically utters the formula of marriage to the man or requests the marriage of the man. And he, in turn, has to acknowledge by saying, I accept. Now, they say there are three distinct formulas that must be articulated by the woman as a declaration, as a request to the man. I won't go through all three, but I will share with you one of them that goes like this. She says to the man, I marry myself to you for the known period and the agreed upon dowry. Or, Zawajtuka nafsi fil mudatil malumati alal mahrel malum. Now, they say that this formula must be recited in Arabic. What's interesting to note is that this formula has elements of the pillars, which is that she's saying she's marrying herself to this person for the known period, which indicates the time, and the agreed upon dowry, which indicates that there is a gift to be given to her. It is important to know that only the respective spouses or potential candidates, only the man and woman who are entering into a Muta can declare this formula. Or if they are not marrying themselves directly, they can have representatives to do so. And the only other representatives other than themselves who can do this is their parent, specifically the father. Now, when the father recites the formula, he will say, I give my daughter in Muta with her agreement. Okay? So he will say all of what was already said in the first formula, and then he would add this to it. Now, if anyone else tries to commission the Muta, this Muta would not be permissible, and it would be null and void, because the only parties that can do this is either the couple directly themselves can do this, or they can appoint their fathers to do so. The second pillar of Muta is the persons. Now, the persons are those to whom we can marry. And this is very important, actually, because a lot of people tend to get it wrong at this point. Yes, a Muslim man and a Muslim woman can do Muta with each other. That's obvious, and that's well and good. Muslim woman, she cannot do Muta with a non-Muslim. She cannot do Muta with a non-Muslim man. However, a Muslim man can do Muta with a Christian or a Jewish woman. And this is very important to know, that the hadiths say that there are two key things that we need to be mindful of when we do Muta, or not even mindful, but the person to whom we're doing Muta with needs to be of two kinds. They need to be either Muslim, or they need to be chaste. Now, what does it mean to be chaste? Because it's obvious what it means to be Muslim. Just someone who accepts Islam and who practices Islam. This is a Muslim. And we can have intimate relationships with that type of person. Now, when it comes to a Christian woman or a Jewish woman, it gets a little bit more complicated, because they may not necessarily adhere to the strict requirement of chastity. They may have a more open sexuality, and we see this to be the case in modern times, where a woman, even men as well, they may dub themselves Christian or Jews, and they may still yet be open to having sexual relationships with outside the context of marriage. And according to Islam and according to the hadiths is saying these types of candidates are not the types of people that you want to be in a Muta relationship with. They are not considered chaste. They are considered fornicators. And so we have a hadith from Imam Rida alayhi salam, who is one of the successors of the Prophet Muhammad and one of the rightly guided imams among the known by the Shias. And he says, it is permissible for a man to conclude a temporary marriage with a Jew or a Christian woman. He said, I would prefer that one engage in Muta with a free Muslim woman. And the reason why he says this is because he wants us to meet the requirement for either Muslim or chaste, right? And he knows quite well that obviously this may not necessarily be the case among the women of Al-Kitab. Now, of course, we're not forbidden from Muta amongst the people of the book, providing obviously that they are chaste. And so we have another hadith from Imam Jafar when he was asked this question, are we permissible to is it permissible to have a Muta with people of Al-Kitab? He says, yes, it is permissible. So marry none but a chaste woman. For Allah, he says in the Quran, and those who guard their private parts except from their wives or those whom their right hands possess, right? They are not blameworthy. So once again, we have two hadiths that is emphasizing that while Muta is permissible amongst the people of the book, meaning the Jews or the Christians, it is better to do it with a Muslim woman. And even more importantly, if one is to do it outside of the realm of Muslim women, then one should ensure that one is doing a Muta with a chaste Christian or a chaste Jewish woman. Now, Islam said it is reprehensible to marry, to do Muta with a Muslim virgin woman. And we have a hadith from the Imam Jafar had a Sikh, who says it is reprehensible because it is a stain upon her family. And so Shias have said that Muta with a virgin without the permission of her father is impermissible and is reprehensible. And if one does do a Muta, then one is not allowed to consummate the Muta. Otherwise, it's reprehensible. Nor is it permissible to engage in a Muta with a non-believer. I think this is pretty obvious to most Muslim men. Nor are we allowed to do Muta with the enemy of Islam and Ahlul Bayt. And lastly, a man is not allowed to marry the daughter of his sister-in-law, nor the daughter of his brother-in-law, because without the permission of his wife. If he does that, the Muta is null and void until he receives the permission of his wife. Now, the dower or the dowry. Now, the dower is known as property. Now, whether this property is presented in the form of money or in kind, the amount must be safe from increase or decrease, meaning that once this dowry has been specified and has been agreed upon by the two parties, one is not allowed to decrease it or increase it in any manner. That is the specified amount, that is the agreed upon amount, and that is what one has to give to one's wife. They say that if the wife or if your temporary wife wants to you to describe the dowry in a way that they understand what it is exactly you're giving to them, it is their right, and you should. You have to make it very clear what it is that you're giving to them. And you have to make it such that the person does not remain ignorant of what it is that you're offering them. And so if they're requesting you to describe it, to explain it, to make it known to them, you have to do so. And they say that she has the right to ask for the dowry up front. Meaning that if you say this is what you're going to give to her, then she can do one of two things. She could say, yeah, I'll wait for you to deliver it to me, to give it to me at a later date. Or she can say, no, I would like to see it here and now, and I'd like to have it up front. And that is well within her right. And one is not able to take back any of it. Okay? One is not able to take back any of it. There are, of course, some exceptions where that may be possible. The few exceptions is where one finds out that the Muta marriage is null and void because this person, unbeknownst to you, actually has a husband. Okay, so in the event that she marries you without your knowledge that she has a husband, and you find out later on you can take back the dowry that you've given to her, because the marriage is null and void. Now, this is, of course, is providing that you did not consummate the marriage. Okay. Now, in the event that everything is kosher, you marry this person and you give her her dowry, but for some reason she doesn't fulfill the conditions of the contract, meaning that you guys have agreed that, you know, there's an expected amount of time where you would be intimate on these certain days, this time of the month, and you can even write out how many times you can have intimate relations. All this can be be part of the conditions of the contract. And she does not live up to her agreement. Maybe she misses certain amounts of days. In that case, one can take back or withhold a certain amount of the dowry that's equivalent to the time that she was not present. Now, if her absence is due to the fact that, hey, listen, you know, she perceived you as an oppressor, someone she was afraid of, because maybe you were abusive, or she was on her period, and as a result wasn't able to fulfill that obligation. Islam says that these are all legitimate reasons under the Sharia or under the Islamic law, and therefore she does not need to compensate for that. So the dowry, one must not or cannot take back from the dowry in order to compensate for her absence as a result of these specific reasons. Now, I'm sure people are interested in to find out, well, what is the dowry? What is the amount of dowry that we give to a woman in a Muta relationship? Well, there's two answers to this question. Typically, one is expected to have the parties involved, meaning the man and woman involved in this marriage, to negotiate a settlement that works for them, right? Some women want more than others, or some women want less than others. Some women, they'd settle for something very simple, something very inexpensive, or sometimes some women don't even care about a dowry, and that's okay too. That is permissible. She can remit that, and in that case, you're free of having to provide a dowry. But in the case where dowry is expected, Islam says that the first answer is you can negotiate with each other to see what whatever the dowry is acceptable for her, and you can negotiate that. But typically, the woman needs to understand that it has to be within the means of the man that she's marrying. This is the first and important thing she needs to understand. Then secondly, if there isn't an opportunity or a way for them to agree on or come to an agreement on the dowry, which is referred as the specified dowry, which is the dowry that the couples negotiate, then Islam says the default dowry becomes what is known as the normal dowry. And the normal dowry is the dowry that is of the permanent marriage. Now, this is where it gets even more tricky, especially for today's day and age, because in today's day and age, especially where Muslims are not living in Muslim majority countries, there isn't a culture of dowry. There isn't a culture of Islamic dowry in, say, Canada, US, Germany, France, these Western countries. So for Muslims who are living in these countries, we can't rely on what the normal dowry is, because the normal dowry is basically says that the normal dowry is for a woman who is of a specific age, beauty, and social class within the culture. So whatever that person would normally get within that culture for her beauty, her age, and her social status, that is the amount that one ought to give the woman who's in a Muta marriage. Now, I don't know what a dowry of that amount would be because I don't live in a Muslim country. But that's basically the understanding of what a normal dowry is. It's totally linked or based off of what the culture has acknowledged it to be. And of course, we live in a non-Muslim society. I live in Canada, so I couldn't tell you what that dowry is. But I think that for the most part, it's sufficient to have the specified dowry, which the two couples, I'm sure, could negotiate. Even if there's some challenges there, it certainly can still be negotiated. So that is the 4 pillars of Muta. One of the things that I also want to emphasize among the 4 pillars of Muta is time. The pillar of time is really important because if time isn't specified as to when the beginning and the end period of the Muta begins and ends, then and in these instances, one must be very specific, right? For instance, one cannot say, oh, we will be married until tomorrow or in a week from now. It doesn't work that way. No, one has to be very specific. So one can say in a month from now, on this specific date, this specific day, and at this specific time, the Muta has come to an end. One has to be very specific. So time is another pillar. It's a very short and brief pillar, but this is the most important thing one needs to know about time. Now, I want to look at statutes or conditions of a Muta. Now, this, of course, means the rules, the conditions, and legal provisions of Muta. I'd mentioned this before where I said that one of the legal provisions of Muta is that there must be a declaration and an acceptance, meaning that the woman or someone has to declare that they want or request for the Muta and someone has to accept the Muta. Of course, it's always the woman making the request and the man accepting the declaration or the request. And this is an important aspect or important rule of the Muta. Now, it is also possible and allowable for the condition to be stipulated that the marriage not be consummated. So it is possible to enter into a Muta marriage without sex or sexual intimacy necessarily being part of that marriage. Now, coitus interruptus. Now, of course, coitus interruptus means that a man could withdraw out of a woman prior to ejaculation, and this is permissible even though it is not mentioned as a condition of the contract or a condition within the contract. Okay? In other words, how he enters doesn't need to be stipulated as a condition within the contract. Now, in the event that a woman does become pregnant, they say that the child belongs to the husband not the woman, but to the husband. Now, if a woman declares that she's pregnant, the man has the option of either accepting the child or denying the child. Now, if he denies the child is not his, he has to ascertain that that child is not his. Once it becomes known that it is not, that it is his, he has to take responsibility because the child is his. Now, the aspect of forswearing. Now, remember I mentioned earlier on that forswearing happens in the case of zihar. And zihar means that a husband swears against his wife that, or swears upon his wife that she is to him as his mother's back. And what that effectively does, it puts him into a state of separation. And as a result, she is no longer lawful for him, and he's no longer lawful for her, sexually speaking. And in the event that she decides to insist on having sexual access to him, or in other words, her sexual rights, then he has to do one of two things. He either has to move on by divorcing her completely, or do kafara, or spiritual compensation, to remedy this mistake on his part. Now, in the context of a Muta marriage, as I've said, forswearing or zihar does not pertain to a Muta marriage. And the reason why they say it doesn't pertain to a Muta marriage is because a Muta wife, she doesn't have any claims against her husband other than the right to claim her dower or her dowry. That is the only right or claim that she has. However, a zihar wife, she has the right to claim sexual access to her husband. And she can initiate those rights by declaring that she wants that from him. In which case, it initiates this process where he has to do one of two things, which is, like I said, divorce or do spiritual compensation. So the scholars have said, because the Muta wife doesn't have any other claims to her husband, zihar does not apply, because the only thing that a Muta wife has are not sexual claims to her husband. It's only claims to dower. Now, in the case of inheritance, this is another condition that is a part of the Muta marriage. Now, there are different opinions when it comes to inheritance. There are the opinion from some scholars that say, yes, even in a Muta marriage, there is inheritance. So that's one opinion. Some say no, it's only when the couples stipulate that as a condition within the contract. However, in the case where a child is involved, inheritance does come into play. In the event that there is a child, the child will inherit from both the father and the mother in a Muta marriage. Lastly, there is the waiting period, meaning that after the Muta marriage comes to an end, much like a permanent marriage, the woman is expected to undergo a waiting period, meaning that she is not allowed to get married or have any type of sexual intercourse or have any type of intimate physical relationship with anyone else until she completes this waiting period. Now, the waiting period is just to ensure that after her marriage and where there was sexual activity, it's just to ensure that she is not pregnant. And that if she is pregnant, it can become clear as to who the father is of the child. Now, in respect to the Muta marriage, the waiting period, providing that they were sexually active, is 2 months and 5 days. If there was no consummation of the marriage, or let's say the man decided to terminate, give back the woman the time and terminate the marriage, in which there was never any consummation of the marriage, then there is no waiting period for her. But in the event that she does become pregnant, her waiting period then becomes like that of a permanent marriage, in which the wife or the divorced woman has to wait 4 months and 10 days. And if she is, because she's pregnant, she either has to wait the 4 months or 10 days, or right up until she delivers the child, whichever of the two times is longest. Okay, and that is the consensus among the ulama. Now, so just to conclude what we've talked about, this entire series began with acknowledging that Muta was a well-known practice in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, something that was never banned by him himself. There are no hadiths that substantiates this. There is no widespread companions among his companions who narrates any prohibition of this. We even have the hadith from Umar al-Khattab, who admittedly admits that Muta was something that was practiced in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, and that he himself banned it. And of course, the Shias have said, well, how can Omar ban something that the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran has made permissible? And have neither abrogated nor have prohibited as a sunnah or as a practice or as a prophetic practice. And we have looked at the arguments of the people of Al-Sunnah, and we have either conclusively and credibly refuted those arguments, whether those arguments are based on the Quran or any claims on the Hadith literature. And lastly, we as Shias say that the practice of Muta is a sound, credible, and a practice that certainly I feel that can be of benefit to a lot of Muslim men and women today, especially that we live in a very hypersexual social environment here in the West. Having said that, the ideal marital relationship is to seek out a spouse for long-term or nikah or permanent marriage situation. That is the ideal. However, we have this feature within Islam for those of us who want to use it. It's important that we understand it, not be afraid or ashamed of it, but neither to take advantage of it, and to bring a bad name or connotation to it. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for supporting the content by watching the videos and sharing the videos, or smashing a like, or even subscribing. I really appreciate it. Thank you, and Assalamu alaikum for now.